everyone, and welcome back to the Social Work Rebel podcast. I'm your host, Laura. I'm a licensed master social worker here in New York State. I'm no longer in the big city. I am in central New York. I still work out of the city, but I live upstate now. Woohoo! Welcome back. Today, for the first time in a long time, unless you listen to the bonus episodes, which, by the way, you can subscribe on Buzzsprout to bonus episodes, but this is the first time that I'm just doing a solo episode, which I'm really excited about. This is how the podcast started and was for a really long time, just me blabbing about social work and being a therapist, and I love it. I could do it all day long. I'm not gonna lie, I don't really have a solid plan for today, but I have a little bit of a plan. Today we'll probably start off going through maybe a couple prompts from the Anti-Burnout Card Deck by Laura Warren, Mitch Ablett, and Christopher Willard. I got this as I think it was a gift from the holiday party from my work. I love it. So I usually do a prompt from this in the bonus episodes. So today we'll probably do a couple of those. I'll be talking about kind of just like the day in the life of a therapist, the week in the life of a therapist, and kind of how I've been preparing for private practice. And I feel like I've gotten to a point, like I've submitted my application for my clinical license. I'm just waiting on approval to take the exam. The whole process has been a wee bit annoying, but it's fine. I feel like as a therapist, my confidence has grown so much in the last 2 years. I've just been, and lately too, I've been feeling like I've really been getting in a groove of my practice, and just feeling more secure. You really used to struggle with imposter syndrome, and I do think a part of that was based in truth, that I was a new therapist and I did not know everything. And so, not that I deserved to feel like an imposter, but there were certainly areas of growth, and it was important for me to receive feedback and learn new things. And now I feel a lot more confident. I also just have things that are part of my routine now that make me feel more present, more in tune with my work, more competent in a session, and we'll kind of get into that stuff too. So we'll get into it. Before we dive in, if you are new here, please feel free to like, share, follow the podcast on whatever platform you're listening. Like I said earlier, I do bonus episodes on Buzzsprout, the hosting platform I use, so you can go subscribe over there for however much you want. It's up to you. And we'll kind of get into it. So we'll start with the Anti-Burnout Card Deck. Right now, let's do this prompt. Oh, I like this one, called Reconnecting with Intention. So get cozy, get comfortable, close your eyes if you're able to, and really just focus on what this prompt is saying. Here we go. You know those frustrating days when you ask, why did I ever get into this work? You might want to actually look for an answer and reconnect with those initial intentions and aspirations. This is so important. I think we all need to hear this. Here we go. Take a moment to remember the moment when you first decided to become a clinician. Perhaps it was a collection of experiences. Think back to what was happening in your life, what thoughts came to mind, emotions that arose, and associated body sensations. Remaining curious about what your initial hopes were in doing this work, identify values that are important to you regarding doing this work. Allow your experience now to be supported and grounded by your initial wishes for yourself in doing this work. Notice any surprises that arise, as well as judgments, being aware of pleasant or unpleasant thoughts, feelings, or body sensations with curiosity. Allow yourself to let go of expectations and reconnect as best you can with your initial aspirations as a support to your daily work. Wow. Now take another deep breath. I really enjoyed that. To get into it a little bit for myself, not too much, I started in nursing school, and my second semester, I hated it, didn't love it, didn't really care about it, but I loved the patients, but the actual part of nursing I did not like. So I went into human services. And through that, I found social work. Through social work, I realized that's where I'd always enjoyed working with children. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I could work with kids. I really enjoyed forensic social work. I got into working at a child advocacy center. So through these different experiences that happened as I was going through school, and kind of even just figuring out and learning all the different paths in social work, what social work really was, I think at its core, it was always I'd always wanted to work with kids. I just really loved human connection and people, and I'd always been very active in my community. And so there was also this level of just really desiring community improvement and support in that. And so I guess my intention with doing this work was to improve the community, to raise awareness on particular stigmas around child mental health, and particularly child abuse and maltreatment prevention work. That's where I started. At its core, I just value humans and just deeply empathizing with the human experience and the diversity of the human experience, and really advocating for everyone to be able to live a life that is fulfilling and good and healthy and peaceful and all of the good things. And with that in social work, that looks a lot like social justice work and advocacy work, and even just the day-to-day clinical work that I do now. I gotta say, in terms of being a clinician, I fell into being a clinician. I loved forensic social work. I loved working with kids. There was a lot of different paths I could take. I really do like meso-level social work. I fell into being a clinician, and I'm glad I did, because I love it. But I do also in the future see myself in a more meso or macro position, maybe more leadership, maybe more program-oriented, something like that. But for now, I'm loving it. I love doing person-to-person work and to see the change that happens there, and to just connect with other people. That human connection, for someone just to open up and be so vulnerable and spill to me anything and everything that's internal to them that they've been holding so sacredly, is really such a privilege. So that is the Reconnecting with Intention card from the Anti-Burnout Card Deck. Maybe we'll do another one later. Now we'll kind of get into, I guess, some things I've figured out, just my life as a therapist, some things that have been working, some things that haven't been working. Let's start with the negatives and just get them out of the way. The only negative recently has been my schedule. I think this is something I continuously struggle with, is my schedule just gets out of hand. It gets out of hand. I start to think to myself, well, right now, my husband, he stays home with our daughter, and I work remotely, so I can kind of have sessions whenever, which is not the mindset to have, unless that works for you, go for it. But I have since realized that does not work for me, and I really crave structure and consistency, and having the same work hours every day. Every single day. I kid you not, Monday through Friday, I work different times every single day of the work week. And it's gotten to a point where it's driving me crazy. It really is. So that's something I'm trying to be mindful of. I'm going to be so real. I'm not changing that right now. I'm thinking logistically and into the future. I'm getting my LCSW relatively soon. After that, I'll be starting my own practice, which my boss and my clients all know. When I start my own practice, my clients are able to come with me from the place that I'm currently working at. And at that point, when we're kind of navigating that transition, that's when I'll be letting clients know I'll probably be working really like daytime 9 to 5 hours, because right now that's what works for me and my family. I know it can be helpful to have evening hours or weekend hours, and I'm rejecting that. I'm rejecting this idea for myself, because that's not what works for me, and that's not what works for my family. I have always been perhaps overly accommodating to most people in my life. Being a therapist then just made that really hard, because I try to be almost overly accommodating to my clients. The clients will come. I will be able to fill those slots. When I work remotely and I'm able to work with anyone in the entire New York State, and if I get licensed in other states, I will be able to fill that time and to fill those slots. So that's my intention for the future. And that's just a little hurdle I'm dealing with right now, is trying to integrate some kind of structure into my day so I don't feel so crazy, especially working remotely, and also working remotely while my husband and my daughter are also home. The mom guilt of feeling like if I'm not in a client-to-client session, then I'm not actually working and I should be with my daughter. That's something that people don't, I heard about mom guilt when I was pregnant, and I was like, couldn't be me. And now here I am feeling like every waking moment should be spent with my child, which I guess is good-ish. It shows an attachment, but wow, is that draining. Anyways, that was a tangent on motherhood and being a therapist from home. Here we are. Something I'm really... This will kind of get into things that I've been doing. For a long time, post-grad, I was burnt out. I was in a very, high-intensity job. I just I didn't have the capacity, I didn't have the bandwidth, if you will, to do any more trainings, to do any reading, to look at any research, to do anything that would really keep me learning, keep me in tune with the mental health world, new interventions, anything like that. When I graduated in the middle of the pandemic in May 2020. I was working remotely, and then I started going to the office a couple days of the week. It was chaos at its finest, and I could not be bothered to actually grow as a clinician. And a lot of the work I was doing was very crisis, putting out fires. I didn't really do a lot of deep therapy work with clients. Like, if you have a client that's homeless and also needs to get into a substance use treatment program, we're not, it doesn't make sense in the timeline to be using that time to talk about trauma, unless that's what the client really wants to do. We had to prioritize things, right? So it wasn't until I came to the job that I'm at now where things started to calm down. I was a little bit more financially stable. I was able to catch a breather. But even then, I was in recovery mode at that point. So I'd been burnt out. Now I was at a new job that offered me a lot more stability and amazing supervision and support, areas to grow. It was incredible. And yeah, I still could not be bothered to learn and to grow and to look at webinars and to read, to watch a documentary, none of that stuff. Because I was then just I was no longer in that active burnout, but I was now in recovery mode. I am happy to say, folks, I am no longer in recovery mode. I'm thrilled. I made an Instagram post, I think, about how to keep growing as a social worker. And I posted this when I really felt I've hit, I'm in my groove. I no longer feel burnt out. I no longer feel like I'm playing catch up. And I'd been feeling that way for some time, but I started taking the growth aspect seriously, where for a little bit, I just wanted to have some consistency and some structure, and it was just that, I still wasn't really actively trying to learn new things. That has changed, everyone. That has changed. So, some recent things that I've learned. I'm actually taking a course right now that I'm really excited about. This sounds like I'm trying to sell you on it, and I'm not. It is, oh my gosh, what is it? The gentleman who wrote The Body Keeps the Score did a trauma course on PESI. I think it was almost like a conference. It's like a webinar conference thing. You get continuing education credits for it. It's like 48 hours long. It's pretty hefty. So I've been working my way through it. It did cost money, but you always have access to it because I paid for this course, I feel like years ago at this point. It's been a couple years and I'm just now really cracking into it. And I love it. I'm going to end up pronouncing his name wrong, but it's by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, if that's how you say it, from The Body Keeps the Score. So he did a trauma course on PESI, P-E-S-I, and I would recommend it. I'm not all the way through it, but it comes with a lot of awesome resources. And I've also just been in this space as again, I've had the opportunity to do general practice and to really figure out my niche, where I want to go. That has always been trauma for me. I feel like that's so millennial therapist of me. It feels very trendy a little bit to be like, yeah, I'm a trauma therapist, but here I am. A big piece of that has also been forensic social work has always been something that's been really interesting to me. And I feel like really honing in on trauma treatment, getting specific certifications, really making that my niche is going to be something that's really powerful. And I think also as a clinician, I think generalist practice can be really great and helpful in its own way. I did practice in that way for a very long time. But being able to have an actual very specific niche thing, I think also just is a stress relief for me. I know I have this one area that I focus on, that I treat, and I like to have something that is concrete in that way. So I've been doing that. I know this was a big thing. I definitely saw this on TikTok, but I did a little bit more research and training on EFT, which is the emotional freedom technique that we also know as tapping. So this is something where we tap on the acupuncture or pressure points. So before we actually start tapping on the pressure points, there's kind of this method where you do your SUDS rating, which, if you are uncertain what that is, the SUDS rating is the Subjective Units of Distress Scale. So it's just a fun word for saying, okay, on a scale of 0 to 10, how are you feeling? And so you kind of say, all right, I am feeling anxious right now. On a scale of 0 to 10, how anxious am I feeling? So before you start tapping away, you give yourself that rating. Then I believe the next step would be, this is not a training, by the way. This is just what I recall. Please look into this and do your own research. But from what I've learned so far, then you can kind of almost do a statement of acceptance. We're saying I'm feeling anxious and I accept myself anyways. Something like that. And then after that, we get into tapping all of the acupuncture points, and that's where you can just use 2 or 3 fingers put together. I believe we start off with the side of the hand, And in a few videos I've watched, you can either just say my anxiety, like a shortened version of what you said. You can also just say the full thing. That part I think doesn't really matter. So you just keep tapping. You do the side of the hand, under the arm, like under the armpit, the collarbone, under your mouth, under your nose, under your eye, the side of the eye, your eyebrow, and then the top of your head. And so you go through that. Once you've done the full cycle, then you do another SUDS rating. So at that point, it could be lower, it could be the same, it might be worse, who knows. And then from there you kind of gauge, is this something I need to keep doing? And then you can do like another round of tapping. So I'm really excited about this. I think a lot of my clients are liking it. It seems like, I think, a coping skill that's new and that's fresh that a lot of people don't really know about, that I also think can make someone feel more in control and in their body when they're doing it, which I love. So I love that. I've also been really getting into internal family systems theory and like just using different interventions and techniques from that, because I've really realized as part of me, again, like really trying to dive into this niche of like trauma work and trauma treatment. Internal family systems is something that keeps coming up, and I've noticed it even in my sessions where it's just like, ooh, this would be a good spot for it. So I'm of course like trying to build more skill and expertise in that, and actual like training before I start doing that hardcore. There are some elements to it, and that's kind of the eclectic approach where there are things I'm already very secure in that I think are now within my scope that I'm able to describe or like teach clients about, but there are more complexities of internal family systems work that I have a boundary with myself, like we're not getting into, because it would be more harmful, honestly, for me to talk about stuff I'm not really certain on or I'm still actively learning. So I stick with the stuff that I know that that there's confidence in, that there's actual like skill and more expertise, but I'll be taking like more like serious actual trainings about that. So we have EFT tapping, that stuff. These are the things that I think as a therapist have been so integral into my routine, where I think for a long time I just got so sucked into like being in and out of session. Like, okay, I have a client session, I get it done, and then in working from home, I'm just like, oh, let me just like do the laundry. I have these million other things to do. I have to do an Instagram post. I have to do this, this, and this, and this. And then I wouldn't do my notes, and my notes would build up, and then I just like, okay, I gotta go to another session. It was so focused on the actual therapy sessions where my time outside of that, kind of what I said earlier, didn't feel like work. And so, especially in working remotely, anytime I wasn't in a face-to-face therapy session, I would almost commit that time to like other things. And it wasn't until I saw an Instagram reel by another therapist where they were just like how a therapist spends their work week. And I was like, oh, this is so interesting. And it's now the things that I'm doing. So I think what was in that was like, oh, we practice new coping skills before we recommend them. I'm like, that's awesome. I love that. Like keeping up on like the latest research and techniques, reading a book about a specific intervention, taking a training or a webinar, watching a documentary, stuff like that. Because I've also noticed, which I think this is also just mindfulness at its core and being present, is like when you have these things that you're actively learning and that are actively taking up space in your brain, you're going to be more aware of them, and then it's going to be easier to implement them into practice. For example, when I first started as a therapist, my really primary method of treatment was cognitive behavior therapy. And I remember I was reading through my CBT book, I think it's like the second edition by the Beck Institute, by the Becks. And I remember even just like reading the scripts of a session or going through the different chapters and really having that refresher on CBT and the different strategies. It was so easy for me to then integrate that into session. And I do think that's such an important part of being a therapist, is not just being like, oh great, okay, I have my license, I can kind of clock out now. Like now it's just sessions. Now I can just like do this work. There is an aspect where you do have to keep growing, you know, like there are new and exciting things that are happening. Also, like our brains forget. There's only so much that we can hold. It is important to also just do refreshers. And it's also just energizing. Like going to a conference, whether it's online or in person, especially in person, connecting with other clinicians, other social workers, it really just rejuvenates me. Any time. Like when I was involved in leadership in the NSAW NYC, having those NSAW board meetings or whatever, it energized me so much. I was so just afterwards just thrilled about social work and doing social work things. And I think that's the same energy here, is like the more you lean in, it also just fuels the passion and excitement and the interest. And you kind of just especially develop a real love of learning and growing as a clinician, which I love. I think that's exciting. So these are also things that I've learned to integrate into my life as a therapist, where I've really gotten away from, okay, it's just sessions and checking my email and doing paperwork, right? And that's it. Which I know as I transition into my own private practice, I'll be owning a business. There'll be a lot more to it. But I think these other core components have also just made me excited about the work, and key part, less stressed about therapy sessions, because I feel more prepared and I feel more equipped. And it's kind of that confidence piece and anti-imposter syndrome where I'm just like, wow, I might actually know what I'm talking about. And that is cool. And wow, I have this information that I feel confident in, and these strategies that I know that work, and these techniques of these coping skills that I've tried. So I can actually see what's effective and what's not, what's realistic, what's practical, what feelings could come up in this situation, you know, stuff like that, where you're also harnessing your own experience, to be able to kind of share with clients, you know, because I love journaling, and I've always used journaling as my own like therapeutic practice and coping skill. And I like openly share that in session with clients. Like, okay, well, sometimes when I'm journaling, this is maybe something that can be difficult, and this is how I deal with it. Like if a client has, and we only know that because we have that lived experience of, yeah, like I tried this coping skill, and man, like dunking my head in a bucket of cold water, that just doesn't work when I have to go into the office, you know, so we also just learn better the potential barriers, the potential, things that could make or break a coping skill working, and also just different interventions in general. So that is that. I'm really excited to continue. My week in the life as a therapist has been pretty good. I mean, it's been busy lately because I finally got my caseload back up to full time since coming back from maternity leave. It was pretty low for a minute. Full time, I think for me, is about like 25 to 30 sessions a week. I used to be at a job where, gosh, I had like 1 million sessions a week. It was so crazy. And now that I've gotten used to having not that many, I'm like, wow, I can't imagine having that caseload again. So that's been good. I had like a lot of intake sessions in the last few weeks, which was also just rejuvenating. I love being able to be in like different phases with different clients. Like I have some clients I've worked with for a few years at this point. And it's so exciting to be a part of their journey and to see where they're at now. But at the same time, when you're so used to like the same clients, it was so refreshing to have a handful of intake sessions. Because it's also just different, you know, like you're just getting the ball rolling, it's energizing, you're in those beginning stages of building rapport, and it's just exciting and fun. So if you ever need to spice things up, do an intake session. Well, that's about it. The other parts of my week are really just responding to emails, responding to referrals. I returned to therapy myself. I started working with a therapist last week. Took a break for a little bit. And, nothing in particular. Life is just a little crazy. There's a lot of transitional things going on right now. Motherhood is wild. All that fun stuff. And I gotta say, my therapist, we've had 2 sessions. At first I was a little apprehensive. Second session felt a million times better. I was like, oh my gosh, okay, love this person. I think this is going to be great. But what's interesting is I've always been so anti-note-taking during session, and my therapist takes notes during session, but she does it in such a slick way where I'm so unbothered by it, which I also don't make a lot of eye contact when I'm in a session anyways, which, let's not read into that. But that really opened my eyes, because I do feel like as a social worker, I can be judgmental of other social workers and hold them to weird standards sometimes. And I'm just like, no, this clearly works for her. She also let me know in advance that she does take notes. The way that she handled it, I think, made a huge difference. So she was just like, if you ever feel like that's taking attention away, let me know, call me out on it. And so that helped, but it's the way, I don't know how her setup is, because we do telehealth, but she has it set up in such a way where she's still actively listening and engaging with me, which is good. And it's not like I hear her typing away, I don't hear any of that. She also, this is another thing that she does that I have never thought of, and I still have mixed feelings about, but it works for our sessions, is maybe this was actually only no, it wasn't, but she sets a timer that we can both hear. So she sets a timer for the 40-minute mark, so we know we have 10 minutes left, and then she sets a timer for when the session is completely up. And I was like, that's interesting. And we have 50-minute sessions. I was like, I've never thought about this before. I never thought about it. Now, depends on the client. There are some clients I have to work a little bit more with on, wrapping things up and having that space to kind of decompress and wrap up before the session time is up. But for the most part, it hasn't really been essential for me to set a timer. But maybe it could help, because maybe there's also this space where, okay, if you set a timer, it's almost like set it and forget it. You'll have that thing to you can really get into things and not be so worried of the time, because you'll have an alarm that brings you back and you'll have a space to check in. So I also have mixed feelings about that. I think, oh, that's interesting. Something I never would have thought of, that I think in another world I would have been a little judgmental about, where I'm like, that's interesting. That's cool. So anyways, that's stuff from my personal experience. Some little foods for thought. Let's see. I think we'll kind of wrap it up there. Thank you all so much for listening, for joining me on today's episode. I feel like it was a little chaotic, but these are the things that are on my mind recently as a therapist. Loving being a therapist, loving the work, and making time to grow, to educate myself, to love learning again. I love learning, and the passion for social work is there. It was just gone for a little bit, and now it's back and better than ever. So thank you all so much for listening. I hope you're all doing well. Like I said earlier, I do bonus episodes that are very much this vibe. In the bonus episodes, I also try to do new interventions. So teaching new interventions. I guess I sort of did that with the EFT tapping today. But I have a lot of different workbooks and stuff, so I'll usually just pull an intervention from some random workbook, and we'll kind of go through it together. We always do the Anti-Burnout Card Deck. In the future, we might do other card decks and prompts, so it's just a fun time. You can check that out if you want to. If not, that's fine. That's fine as well. Do your thing. Live life. That's about it. Don't forget to share, follow, comment, DM me on Instagram. Have a fun time, and we will see you next week. Bye.